Zane thought he was just fixing another broken car, but when a mysterious woman dropped off a rusted Mustang with no name, no questions, and a cash payment, he had no idea his life was about to change forever. The garage smelled of engine oil and burning rubber, the air thick with the sound of tools clanking against metal. Zane wiped the sweat from his brow, exhausted from another long, unpaid shift. Business had been slow for months, and if things didn't turn around soon, he'd have to close the shop his father had built from nothing. He was about to shut the doors when a tow truck pulled up, dragging a completely wrecked 1967 Mustang. The car was a disaster. Rust covered its once glorious body, the windshield was cracked, and the tires were flat. It looked abandoned, like it had been sitting in a junkyard for decades. Zane raised an eyebrow as the driver handed him an envelope. Cash payment, no name, no details, just fix it up like new. His gut told him something was off. Customers didn't usually drop off classic cars without a single question, but he was too broke to argue. He glanced inside the envelope and saw more money than he had made in months. Whoever owned this car wasn't just rich, they were desperate to stay anonymous. As the tow truck pulled away, he ran his fingers over the hood. "Who do you belong to?" he muttered under his breath. Little did he know, the answer to that question would turn his entire world upside down. Zane ran his hand over the rusted hood, his fingers tracing the faded Mustang emblem. This car had history, but why would someone pay a fortune to fix it up and refuse to leave a name? Something wasn't right, but he couldn't afford to ask questions. He grabbed his tools and got to work. As he removed the battered hood, a faint scent of old leather and perfume lingered inside. The interior was torn, but beneath the damage he saw something odd. A small, silver locket wedged between the seats. It had initials engraved on it, H.S. Zane frowned. Who was H.S.? Was it the owner, a lost keepsake? He hesitated before pocketing it, deciding he'd figure it out later. Right now, he had bigger problems. The car was in worse condition than he thought. The engine was barely salvageable, the frame was rusted, and every part screamed too expensive to fix. But a job was a job, and with the cash advance, he had no choice but to make it work. As he worked late into the night, his mind wandered. Why would someone leave behind a classic like this? And why did he feel like this wasn't just about a car? The next morning, just as he wiped grease from his hands, the sound of heels clicking against concrete made him look up. A woman stood at the entrance of the garage, tall, elegant, and wearing dark sunglasses that hid her eyes. She was dressed too expensively for this part of town, her posture too composed. Zane's instincts immediately sharpened. She pulled off her sunglasses slowly, revealing deep, piercing eyes that held secrets he wasn't ready for. Then she spoke, and her first words sent a chill down his spine. "You found the locket, didn't you?" Zane's fingers instinctively tightened around the locket in his pocket. His heart pounded as he studied the woman standing before him. Her presence didn't match the kind of people who usually walked into his garage. She was out of place, too polished, too composed, too familiar with this situation. He kept his expression neutral. "And if I did?" The woman took a slow step forward, the sharp scent of expensive perfume lingering in the air. "Then you already know this car isn't just a car." Zane narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Instead, she ran her fingers over the Mustang's dented hood, as if it carried memories only she could see. Then, in a quiet voice, she finally spoke. "My name is Harper Sullivan," she said, "and that car, it belonged to someone I once loved." Zane felt a shift in the air. There was pain behind those words, but he didn't know why. "Why bring it here?" he asked. "Why not some high-end restoration shop? You obviously have the money." Harper let out a small, knowing smile. "Because money isn't what I'm looking for." Zane's stomach twisted. He had been around long enough to know when someone wasn't telling the whole truth. "Then what are you looking for?" he pressed. Harper finally turned to him, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that caught him off guard, a mix of hope and fear. "Let's just say," she paused, tilting her head slightly, I'm searching for something money can't buy. Zane didn't know what she meant, but something told him this wasn't just about fixing a car. And whatever Harper Sullivan was searching for, he was about to get caught in the M. Zane felt an uneasiness settle in his chest. Harper Sullivan wasn't just a random rich woman trying to restore an old car. She was searching for something more. But what? He pulled the locket from his pocket, letting it dangle between his fingers. This belongs to you, doesn't it? Harper's breath hitched. For the first time, her confidence wavered. She reached for it carefully, her fingers brushing against his. But she didn't take it. Instead, her eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, Zane saw something raw, a painful memory. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Between the seats," Zane said, watching her reaction closely. "Looks old. Important." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "More than you know." Zane crossed his arms, studying her. "Then why leave it behind?" Harper hesitated, looking away. "Because I wasn't sure if I had the courage to face it again." Her words sent a ripple of curiosity through him. There was a story here, a deep one. He glanced at the car, then back at her. "This isn't just about the Mustang, is it?" Harper exhaled slowly, her fingers tracing the locket. "No, it's about a promise." Zane frowned. "A promise to who?" She finally looked at him again, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "To the man I should have never let go." The words hung between them, thick with unspoken history. Zane had fixed hundreds of cars in his life, but something told him this was the first time a car was about to fix something in return. And whatever Harper's story was, he was now a part of it. Zane's grip tightened around the locket as Harper's words lingered in the air. The man she should have never let go. He glanced at the Mustang, the rusted metal and peeling paint now holding more than just mechanical issues. It held a past, a love story, a regret. Zane had seen all kinds of people walk through his garage doors. Rich businessmen, reckless street racers, struggling fathers trying to keep their old cars running. But Harper? She was different. He leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "So, let me guess, this car belonged to him?" Harper nodded, a small, nostalgic smile tugging at her lips. "Yes, he loved it more than anything." Zane raised an eyebrow. "More than you?" Harper chuckled, but there was sadness in it. "Maybe, but I didn't mind back then." She ran a hand over the Mustang's hood, her voice soft. "This car was our escape. Our late-night drives, our stupid road trips. It was the one thing that was ours." Zane studied her closely. "And now you want it restored. Why?" Harper's expression shifted. Hesitation, vulnerability. Then she met his eyes, determination replacing the doubt. "Because if I can bring this car back to life," she swallowed hard, "maybe I can fix what I broke." Zane exhaled. He wasn't sure whether she was talking about the car or something much bigger. But one thing was clear. This job wasn't just about fixing a Mustang. It was about fixing a past that refused to stay buried. And as Zane picked up his wrench, one thought echoed in his mind. Some cars were meant to be rebuilt, but some stories, they were meant to be rewritten. Zane spent the next few days working tirelessly on the Mustang, but something felt different this time. He had fixed plenty of old cars before, but none of them carried the weight of an unfinished love story. As he replaced the broken engine parts and sanded down the rusted edges, he couldn't shake the thought, who was the man Harper had left behind? And why, after all these years, was she trying to bring this car back to life? Late one evening, just as he finished tightening a bolt, Harper walked into the garage. She was dressed more casually than before, her usual confidence replaced with quiet uncertainty. Zane wiped the grease off his hands. "You're here late?" She hesitated before stepping closer. "I wanted to see the progress." Zane nodded toward the car. "It's coming together, but something tells me you're not just here for an update." Harper let out a small sigh. "You're right." She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then turned the screen toward him. It was a picture of a man. Zane's breath hitched. The guy in the photo looked familiar. Too familiar. And then it hit him. It was a picture of the old man who had visited his garage just weeks ago. A man who had stared at this same Mustang with pain in his eyes. A man who had whispered under his breath, "I should have never let her go." Zane's pulse raced. He looked up at Harper, shock settling in. "Harper," he said slowly. "He was here." Her eyes widened. "What?" Zane exhaled. "The man you're looking for. He came to me first." Harper took a step back, her breath shaky. That's impossible." Zane shook his head. "No, it's not." For the first time since he met her, Harper looked truly shaken. And in that moment, Zane realized this wasn't just about fixing a car. It was about fixing two people who had been lost for far too long. Zane watched as Harper's breath turned shaky, her hands gripping the phone tighter. She had spent years searching for closure, and now fate had thrown it right in front of her. "You're telling me," she whispered, barely able to form the words, "that he was here, in this garage?" Zane nodded. He didn't say much, but when he saw the car, he looked like a man carrying a lifetime of regret. Harper's lips parted slightly, her usual confidence completely shattered. She turned toward the Mustang, her fingers tracing the hood as if touching the past itself. "I thought he forgot about me," she admitted. "I thought he moved on." Zane leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "People don't forget the ones they truly love, Harper." She let out a shaky breath, then squared her shoulders. "Where is he now?" Zane hesitated before answering. "He owns a small bookstore a few miles from here. Told me it was the only thing that kept him going all these years." A flash of something deep and painful crossed Harper's face. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. Zane stood there, watching her go, knowing exactly where she was headed. The small bookstore smelled of aged paper and forgotten memories. Harper stepped inside, her heart hammering. It had been 20 years. Would he even recognize her? Then she saw him. Bent over a book, his silver hair slightly messy, the man she had once loved more than anything. As if sensing her presence, he looked up. And the moment their eyes met, time stood still. His breath caught. "Harper?" Tears blurred her vision. She took a hesitant step forward. "Hey, stranger." For a moment, neither of them spoke, but in their silence, 1,000 unspoken words filled the space between them. Then, slowly, he smiled, the same way he used to all those years ago. And Harper knew. Some love stories don't end. They just wait to be rewritten.